Test. Whoa. So do you, okay. So if I stand back from it, it works much better. So I want to thank you all for coming here this evening. I'm Bruce Lincoln. I'm the co-founder of Silicon Harlem. Silicon Harlem is focused on and committed to ensuring that Harlem is a hub for tech and innovation. And so it's very exciting that you're all here this evening as we look to now move our initiative into a very important area of the city, East Harlem, El Barrio. So tonight we're here for the future of East Harlem. This is another one of what we call our co-visioning sessions, where it's important for us to bring together a broad cross-section of the community to think about the future of East Harlem, not so much on the level of sort of thinking about it from a techno-geeky standpoint, from really the standpoint of being people on the ground who love these communities, who want to preserve the unique cultural characteristics of these communities, but understand the role that technology can play. And what we'll get into more is our initiative with RISE, a resilient network project that we're happy to be working along with the Economic Development Corporation of the City of New York, as well as with the New America Foundation. Just to give you a sense of the vision of RISE, I'd like to ask Human Saberi to come up, and he has a short presentation for you. Let's give him a round of applause.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, Bruce. And thank you to Silicon Harlem for holding this event. It's been a pleasure working with you guys, and I'm excited to join you tonight. So as Bruce mentioned, my name is Human Saberi. I am the program manager on Resilient Communities. We are a program, a New York City-based program that is part of the New America Foundation, which is a policy institute and think tank based in Washington, D.C. Now, on the Resilient Communities team, we have a specific definition of resiliency that we like to use. We believe that resiliency is not just about the ability of a community to return to a previous condition or to rebound to where it was before, but it's actually a transformative process of deepening relationships to develop collaborative solutions. Now, underlying this belief are our principles, which involve listening and learning from communities, nurturing honest and transparent partnerships, and addressing the systemic factors that deepen inequities around climate change and access to opportunity. So what is it that we exactly do on RISE? Well, we're working with communities to collaboratively design and build resilient local wireless networks that are designed to benefit Sandy impact small businesses, to build community-led disaster preparation and preparedness, to address the digital divide, and to serve as a local economic driver and neighborhood platform for local communication and learning. So the process by which we do this, a core part of our program is the digital stewardship initiative, which involves 6 to 8 local residents being trained not just on the tech skills, the sort of the hardware and the software of wireless networking, but also on community outreach skills and community organizing skills. And yes, that is a photo of Bruce crimping Ethernet cable, which was part of our training. Part of our process is also working with community organizations to co-design these networks. So it's not a top-down process. It's a very organic one in conversation and collaboration with our partners. We also work on community outreach and reaching out to Sandy impacted small businesses. And ultimately, this leads to us building resilient wireless networks in each of our partner communities. So on that note, I'd like to show you, as part of RISE, the New America Foundation is working with 6 local organizations. We're working with the Point Community Development Corporation in Hunts Point, with Silicon Harlem here in East Harlem. We're working with Project Hospitality in Midland Beach, Staten Island, with the Fifth Avenue Committee, which is in Gowanus, as well as the Kings Bay Y in Sheepshead Bay, and the Rockaway Development and Revitalization Corporation, which is based in downtown Far Rockaway. And so just to wrap up here, I want to leave you with this thought, which is that we believe that if we build with and invest in who is already working in a community and what they're already working on, that our resiliency efforts will build capacity, add value, and contribute to long-term stability and equity. Thank you very much.
So Silicon Harlem was founded in 2013, and my partner in that effort is the inimitable Clayton Banks, who I now have the pleasure of asking to come up to the stage. And this is a vision that we've both shared now for some time, so it's very exciting when we get to see the things that we do start to take hold in the communities and see the community adopt that. And a tremendous advocate for that is Clayton Banks. He's our CEO. He's my co-founder. Let's give him a round of applause as we move on to the next part of the program.
So, this is exciting. I mean, it really is. Look at all the people here. It's amazing. You know, this is one of those things where when we started Silicon Harlem, as Bruce was just saying, you know, and there's actually a video out there where we were interviewed by NBC on April 3rd of 2014. And we said then, boy, we hope to see, you know, co-working spaces in Harlem. We hope to see an accelerator, maybe an incubator. You know, we hope to see our startup community really start to get cohesive and grow. You know, we'd love to even see if we could attract, you know, maybe a tech company into Harlem. 3 years later, every single one of those things have happened. It's not always that you can say you want to do something and you actually get it done, and we thought it would take 15, 20 years. We got it done in 3 years. So when we think about that, we go, at the end of that interview, we had also said if all that happens, one of the things that we thought would be a great vision for Upper Manhattan was to create a gigabit infrastructure. That was sort of the last thing we said. So as we look back and we go, wow, there's 7 co-working spaces in Harlem. There's incubators, there's accelerators, there's a robust startup community culminating in the WeWork on December 1st of 2016, where we partnered with WeWork and developed a program called Mission Possible, and we're able to locate 40 companies into that facility with 3 months free rent and discounted rent throughout the rest of the year. So economic impact day one. 40 companies in one location is an economic impact day one. So when we thought about that, the one thing we were concerned about is how do you sustain that? You know, how do you sustain a robust startup community? And by the way, we also attracted a major tech company into our community, which is led by the tremendously successful young lady, Jessica O. Matthews, who put her company right on Lenox Avenue, rebuilt a brownstone, and has put over $300,000 into our economy in less than 6 months. So we feel very good and proud of all that. But one of the things we thought was really the bottom line is, how do we sustain that? That has to be sustained by a great infrastructure. So what we're doing at Silicon Harlem now is working diligently to provide the best broadband at an affordable cost for everyone. That's why the tagline you see here, everyone deserves a connection. 40% of the households in Upper Manhattan have no broadband. Some of us don't think about that on an everyday basis because we can take it for granted. So most of you can afford it. You don't think about it anymore. It's no big deal. 40% of the households in Upper Manhattan have zero broadband. That means that a lot of those homes have children in them. That means the children can't get their homework done at home. You walk around Harlem at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and you'll find kids hanging out at Starbucks and libraries trying to get a Wi-Fi signal just to get homework done, and it's still not good enough because they're working on a phone. And there's something wrong with us when we let that kind of stuff happen. At least that's, to me, it's something wrong with us. So Silicon Harlem, along with all of you in this room, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we have to do something about that. So we're devoting our time over the next few years with a lot of great partners. Some of them are in the room today, like Sky Packets, who's been very dedicated to urban markets and deploying networks. We're working with them. We're working with all of the stakeholders to make that happen. The other thing that we thought is, as much as we've been very good at developing this tech hub, a lot of it's been in Central Harlem. And we knew if we're gonna really be inclusive, it has to spread. So being here in East Harlem, getting this community focused on this, because tech and innovation is truly an economic driver. We talk about sustaining the culture and the rich history of East Harlem. It will do that if we can embrace tech and innovation, because that's what's driving the economy, that will make people successful. None of our businesses should be struggling when you got tech all around them that can help. So we have this great mission to figure this out. I do want to point out that you see these lovely programs here, and I wanted to thank some of the people that are also very much dedicated to this community and dedicated to the vision that we're sharing with you tonight. The Office of the Speaker, Melissa Mark Vivarito, who's been very helpful. She was putting the word out. She could have been here, but she definitely is a big supporter of all of this, and she includes Bruce and I on her task force for her inclusion initiative. So we actually have a voice at the table with the speaker. You've already heard from Human of New America and the resilient communities that they're building. You're going to soon hear from Teresa, who's also here. We thank them. The East Harlem Community Alliance, been very helpful, very active in the community. Hope Community, we just shared an event with them and Union Settlement last week, galvanizing the community on some of the great things that they're doing here. We have Community Board 11 and Diane Collier, who's actually has a very busy night, but took the time to share with us this evening. I mentioned Union Settlement and, of course, NEMA. So we're very fortunate that we're starting to see all these great organizations that have been doing great work for a long time. We're also starting to galvanize around tech and innovation as an economic driver. I also want to acknowledge NYC EDC, who you'll hear more from Kokai in a moment, but also Gary Johnson, who works in the mayor's office, who's here. We're very happy that he's here. He's a policy advisor to the mayor on smart cities and things of that nature. And then there's a few of my friends from our new offices at WeWork that are here, so I'm happy to see them. And I will finally say that if there's one thing that I hope we all can do together, it's not about writing a bunch of white papers. It's not about how great of a conversation I can have with Congress. It's not about even, dropping names like the mayor and things of that nature. This is really about the community. It really is. Everything we're doing at Silicon Harlem, some people go, is Silicon Harlem a nonprofit? The answer is no. So we do these things as a for-profit company. In other words, we spend our own money to do a lot of these things, but we make money doing other things. So we believe that you can actually do good and make money at the same time, and that's exactly what our goal is to do. And again, this is vital. This isn't sort of a nice thing to do. This is a must-do. How can we possibly be really connected if 40% of the people are not? That means we're leaving 40% of the genius in our community behind. I always say we could be farming on Mars right now if we just tapped into those people. Genius is everywhere. Genius is distributed everywhere evenly. Access and exposure is not. By the way, you Twitter folks, the hashtag is, what's the hashtag, Anthony? eHarlem Rise. So feel free to quote me. So also, speaking of social media, it was really funny. You know, I had asked my team to kind of say, you know, tell me when we hit, we're very deliberate on how we do social media, so we're not looking for 1 million people and nothing like that. We just want like people who are really caring about the community and really want to get into broadband and want to talk about digital literacy, which is something we're very passionate about. And oddly enough, I said, you know, tell me when we hit the 3,500th person, when we get 3,000, who would that be? And do you know, a guy from Harlem, or lives in Harlem, was number 3,500, and his name is Jason Gershenson, and I want him to come up here if he's here, because I have a pair of Silicon Harlem socks for you right now. My man. And by the way, he's also, I believe, are you an attorney?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so I looked them all up afterwards. I said, let me make sure before I give out these unbelievable, beautiful socks. You make sure you take a picture with those socks and throw them out on social media. Thank
I
you.
certainly will. Thank you.
Give it to him. The other thing I'm getting ready to call up our panelists, but the other thing that's really important to us is connecting with the small business owners here in East Harlem. We've been on the pavement, we've been trying to knock on every door, and you know how that can be. It's like, who are you, and what are you doing, and get out of my store. So we're trying to do our best to demystify the whole process that we're going through and putting in this resilient network, and that's a large reason why we wanted to have this event. Whether you're a business owner here or no one in this area, we are asking for your help. Everything we're doing for them is essentially free. There's no cost to them. We're putting in equipment in their space so that they can be a part of this network. Think about it. When there's a disaster, you know, if you think about it, you know, your lights go out, all types of things happen, and including the internet can go down. So when we build a resilient network, one of the great things about the resilient network, you can still communicate even when the internet goes down. It's like having a network inside your home or inside your office. You can still communicate. So when somebody says, hey, you know, someone's sending a message through the network saying, hey, I'd love to, you know, I need some water. Someone else on the network can say, well, I have water. Or I need somewhere to, you know, sleep. Well, I have somewhere to sleep. You don't know what's going to happen during a disaster. So that's why this resilient network is so important. And we have run into a lot of resistance only because, and I would say a majority of it is just a lack of knowledge. And so we're doing our best to spread that and to increase the literacy because it is to their benefit, and you look at the extra things that come with it. If you're on this network, you also have the capability of Wi-Fi. So now you can offer people that come to your facility free Wi-Fi. It's not costing you anything. So there's a lot of benefits to the resilient network besides even the disaster. So it's really important that we get the word out, and we're hoping that all of you in this room, if you know people in East Harlem, Anthony back there will take your card or your name and your information, and we will follow up aggressively because we want to fulfill our duty in making sure this community is fully networked and ready to go. So with that, I want to thank the volunteers, by the way. Anthony, who's here, my great co-founder, Bruce Lincoln. Yeah, I don't know if Nick is here. Is Nick here? All right, so Nick is, and Hans, some of you may have heard of Hans. Well, he was here, but he had to leave, and Susan, who set up all the food. So thanks to all the team of Silicon Harlem. And now it is my great pleasure to bring up our incredible, incredible panel. In fact, this may be the most incredible panel you're going to hear tonight, for sure. So first of all, let me bring up Kokai Otosi. I got the first name right. I'm not sure if I.
You have the last name.
All right. If you see how it's spelled, you know what I mean. But Kokai Otosi, and she is from the Center for Urban Innovation, which is housed in the NYC EDC. So thank you.
Thank you.
Have a seat. We'll talk more with her in just a moment as I bring up Jorge or George Rivera. Where are you at, sir? Come on up here. George has a great company right here in East Harlem called Digital Laundry. He's going to tell you more about that as the evening moves on. And then, of course, the great Teresa Basillo from New America, Resilient Communities, the executive there. And then finally, some of you probably know this company that's done such great work in all the communities of New York, Damian Howard of Perscolis. Come on up, Damian. So, of course, the topic tonight is, the future of East Harlem, and the subtitle is Building a Resilient Network. The whole idea, as I've said, is how do we ensure that this community benefits from their own innovation? That's really the critical thing. And we can do this. We can really do this. In fact, this is exactly how Silicon Harlem started. We started with getting a group of people together, and we just kept grinding and building and grinding and building by creating a perception, right? So the Silicon Valley is a perception more than it is a place. We thought the same thing. Silicon Harlem ought to be a state of mind. It should be a perception and not necessarily just a place. So that young person in Dallas, Texas comes out of college and says, rather than go to Silicon Valley, I had to go to Silicon Harlem. Because I was in school, that's what everybody told me, go to Silicon Valley, and I did. But but that was a perception. When I got there was a lot of bums and homeless people and everything else. So it wasn't like this paradise. I thought I was going to be walking on gold streets. But that's not the case. But the mindset was there. And that's what we have to do with East Harlem. People who don't live here already see East Harlem as a great place. They see it as a place changing. They see it as a place that they can grow. They see it as a place for investment. But our own community has to see it that way in order for us to really make this work. So that's what we're going to be talking about. We're also going to be talking about what this resilient network really means and all that kind of stuff. So, by the way, this is being streamed. So if you are texting with people or emailing, tell them just go to siliconharlem.net. This entire conversation is now being streamed on our website. And we're very proud of that. And thanks to Jolie McPhee back there, who pretty much streams all of our activities. So I'm going to start with Kokai, because Kokai has all the money. So, why don't you, Kokai, give us you can tell us a little bit more about you and urban innovation, but also the question that I would love to start with is just more of a citywide view of how you see these type of things happening.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Kokai Atasi. Once again, thank you very much for coming.
Hit the button. There you go.
Hello. Nice. All right. So once again, my name is Kokai Atasi. I work for the New York City Economic Development Corporation, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. So I do indeed work in the Center for Urban Innovation at EDC, and we are tasked with running various programs and initiatives to support emerging industries in New York City. And so we are indeed funding Rise NYC, of which New America and Silicon Harlem are partners. And that program is a very large program that is actually federally funded, so I don't hold the money. I will concede that we've been given this money for the benefit of businesses across New York City. So there are 11 different other contracts that we are implementing through the Rise NYC program to help small businesses become more resilient to the impacts of climate change. And these technologies are quite varied. So we're installing Wi-Fi in East Harlem, as well as 5 other neighborhoods across the city. But we're also installing technologies that provide renewable energy to small businesses, and other technologies that provide deployable flood panels to businesses. So again, very varied, a very broad scope, but all towards the general idea of resiliency in the city. And so EDC is, as many of you may know, tasked with leading the charge of economic development in New York City, while also, supporting equity and increasing access to opportunities for New York City residents across all of the 5 boroughs. And we do that through a number of ways. Sometimes we, manage real estate assets for the city, implement capital projects for the city. But in the Center for Urban Innovation, where I sit, once again, we think really critically about emerging industries in New York that could potentially offer really good, high-paying jobs to communities, and help further bolster neighborhoods across the city. And resiliency and sustainability are of particular importance to us. I don't know how many of you were here after Hurricane Sandy, but I was definitely here in the middle of that storm. And for those of us who were here, we very much realized that the city could be doing so much more to promote resiliency here. And we're one of many global cities that are faced with challenges of climate change because of the fact that we are a waterfront city. And so we're really thinking critically about how we can engage the private sector and how we can engage innovation to help us solve these challenges. And so in the Center for Urban Innovation, we are encouraging entrepreneurship. We're encouraging ideas as to how to make not only small businesses more resilient, but as Human said earlier in his intro, how to make communities able to activate the resources they already have existing in the neighborhood and bolster those so that there's further cohesion existing there. And so not only are we supporting innovation, but we're also trying to increase access to various technologies, because we recognize that, even in the case of Hurricane Sandy, communities that are often most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change end up being the ones that actually don't have ready capital or available investment to actually receive those technologies. So through Rise NYC, we're really trying to, one, encourage technologists who have really great ideas about how they can make the city more resilient, deploy their technologies and demonstrate the usefulness of those technologies. But at the same time, we're also trying to increase access to communities that wouldn't necessarily know about these technologies or have other opportunities to partner with them otherwise. So broadly, EDC is really thinking about how we can think creatively about how to marry economic development with resiliency and sustainability.
Excellent. We're going to follow up with you in just a moment. I'm going to come to Teresa for a moment, but definitely want to follow up with you on what type of projects maybe some of these businesses could propose, or what types of things they can get involved in that you guys already have in place. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But Teresa, just to follow up on Kokai, you guys are glued at the hip. So what does that mean? What she's saying about the sustainability and about resiliency, what's it mean to you? What's it mean to New America? And how do we all support that?
So again, my name is Teresa Basilio. I'm the Deputy Director at New America's Resilient Communities Project. I'm the newest member of the team. I've been there for 3 months now. I'm really happy to be here, so thank you so much for the invitation. So for us, resilience, Human did a wonderful job of kind of introducing what we mean by resilience. And so I just want to get in a little more detail about what that means for us in our work. So we talked about the process of building relationships and developing collaborative solutions. So what does that mean? So for us, we really base our work on the principles of digital justice as well as community technology. And what that means is that it's important, as Kokai was talking about, access is super important, as well as active participation by historically marginalized communities. We know that that's really important. Also, common ownership. So the idea that information and technology are common goods, that part of the commons, I think folks might have heard of that terminology, but the idea that that this is something that belongs to the community, belongs to the people, and so we need to figure out ways to distribute and and own the information and the technology. And then finally, fostering healthy relationships. So why do we focus on that? So for us, it's really important to think about, holistically when people use technology. There's a lot of fear sometimes, anxiety. I know I get very anxious when I have to describe Wi-Fi technology to people. It doesn't come naturally to me. I think that for a lot of folks, it can feel alienating or hard to understand. Also, we want to think about how do we support each other, because there's a lot of challenges to accessing this technology. How do we support each other and support our communities in being able to access these resources and use it for the common good? So again, it's important, again, that these concepts of digital justice and of community technology need to undergird everything that we talk about when we say resilient communities. And so, I just want to add on that we hear a lot about resiliency in relationship to disasters, right? We heard, certainly Superstorm Sandy was an example of, the kinds of things that can happen with the realities of climate change. We also think that there's other stressors in our communities that we need to be thinking about, and how do we use technology to help communities organize, to help communities think about how the technology can be used, again, these resources being used to foster healthy relationships, foster the kinds of relationships that people need in order to be able to answer the issues that are impacting their community. So that's the secondary piece that we mentioned when we talk about resiliency, is the building the collaborative, the developing the collaborative solutions. So what we need to be able to also be thinking about beyond preparedness, which is super important. Also, like, what are the everyday struggles and everyday stressors that our communities face that we also need to be able to use the technology to respond to?
Well, talking about using technology, I'm going to actually, Damien, I'm going to come to you. Now, Damien works for Perscolis. We've actually hired folks, Silicon Harlem has hired folks out of Perscolis, and I know some of you have done the same. So as we're talking about there needs to be people that are putting in these networks, as Teresa just said, talk to us about that. How are we creating prepared folks for these type of jobs? We know that at Silicon Harlem, we're very focused on broadband development to the point where we're going to actually compete with Verizon and Time Warner, for all you all to know. We're about to come out like that, all right? Fred Jackson, who's here, ex-NBA player, he's helping us. We got all types of great people helping us out with this rollout. But it requires us to have people that can actually do this kind of work. Actually, like you showed, Human showed, splicing, in our case, fiber, putting in routers, putting up access points, all the stuff that many of you probably know about, but certainly talk to us about how we're going to get the workforce of the future.
Sure, thank you. So I'm Damien Howard. I've been with Perscolis for 16 years, and I'm the Vice President of Social Ventures at Perscolis. Very quickly, as an overview about Perscolis, Perscolis is a 22-year-old national IT workforce development organization. We focused on underserved community residents and making sure that we're able to provide them with the proper hard and soft skills to not only land a job, but to keep a job once they land the job. So we give them all the wraparound support services to make sure that they are successful after they complete our program. So we believe that we have a three-pronged approach to making sure that the individuals that we serve are successful. One, we want to make sure that they understand that, yes, the program is at no cost to them, but it costs us quite a bit of money to make sure that you go through this program. So we need your sweat equity, we need your dedication, your passion, your ambition. Every day you need to bring your whole self to the table, because we are going to make sure that you succeed. We do that by covering three areas. One is by creating comparable and competitive employment opportunities, also by bridging that skills divide that we currently are dealing with, and also by achieving diversity and inclusion. So when I think about your question and how could we get that workforce prepared for these jobs, one, we have to understand the socioeconomic conditions and factors that we are dealing with individuals when they're coming from underserved communities. And one thing that you highlighted earlier was the issue of access, and that's one thing that you always run into when you're thinking about financial escalators and elevators in order to get people to move towards a certain goal inside of their lives. And when we think about access at Perscolis, is definitely access to technology, but it's about once you have that access and once you have that engagement with technology, how do you transform that interaction, that engagement with technology into a career or into a business? What are the steps that you need to take in order to be able to do that? So the way that we address that is by saying, okay, listen, if you have an interest inside of technology, and Silicon Harlem is a great place to implement all of that experience and expertise and the wittiness that's connected to using technology. We want to say, hey, come to us and let us train you, and we'll provide that training that you need in order to be effective in the workforce. So we look at a number of areas. We look at entry-level jobs, which is the A plus and Net plus and Security plus. We also have network engineers, which get you your CCNA. We even do quality assurance, software testing, even coding and cybersecurity. Because there will always be a career inside of technology. So when we think about our partnership at Silicon Harlem, and giving individuals in the community opportunity, we have to explain to them what access really means to careers inside of technology. We have to make it plain to them to say, hey, listen, there is real opportunities inside of IT. Explain to them that IT grows leaps and bounds by the moment. You know, there's always a space being built inside of IT. So you have mobile, you have cybersecurity, you have humanized data, you have IoT, smart homes and offices. And we can explain to our community residents that there is an opportunity for you to get involved, get engaged, and create a career where you can move yourself and your family beyond with a proper training.
That's amazing. I don't know if everybody heard what you said, but we're talking about training our young folks right here in this neighborhood to move into the middle class, if you will, with great jobs, great skills that are sustainable. I mean, if you however you feel about the federal government, one of the things that everybody agrees about is that the infrastructure has to be dealt with. And that means jobs, but it means jobs for people who are prepared, people who are skilled, people who are getting the certifications. That's what Perscolis is doing. You know, we worked very hard with Skypackers and others to check out the Harlem Wi-Fi that we have in Central Harlem. We used Perscolis' help to do that. Kids learned how to literally monitor a Wi-Fi signal. They can take that skill from whatever they did with us to wherever they want to go. That is what we're talking about here. Now, there's a guy I haven't talked to yet, right? This is George. Now, George is the private sector guy, right? You heard all this nice nonprofit stuff. My man looking for money. He likes to earn money. But George, very successful media guy in the private sector. And so when he launched this company, and it's a very successful company, he decided to move it into East Harlem. He's right on 120th Street and Park Avenue. George, I'll let you tell your story, but it's so good to have you here. Talk a little bit about some of the stuff you've been hearing with your fellow panelists, but also just why you chose East Harlem.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for the invitation tonight. I do live and work just a couple blocks from here, and I should tell you that I grew up on the west side on 125th Street. And I was one of those very fortunate kids who was given opportunities, and I was able to take advantage of those. So I had a lot of wonderful educational opportunities, and I became involved in the media when it was purely an analog business back in the film days in the 70s. So my career tracks literally the transition from analog to digital. And the creation of our company, which is 2 blocks away, Digital Laundry, literally was born at that transition point. So I work, and I have been very fortunate and successful in both public television and commercial television to win several Emmys and to run a successful company that provides programming. So I'm a creative person, but I'm a director fundamentally. And directors, many of us are really techies. I'm my father's son, and I need to know how things work. I need to really understand how cameras operate, what they can do, what they can't do. So I transitioned from various executive and senior positions in commercial television to run an independent company. 1 year, we were fortunate enough to produce a national series for PBS. That year, I wrote a check for 6 figures for rent. And my hand shook as I did it. And I swore that day that I would never do that again. So my sister, who worked with me, and I started walking literally every block in Manhattan from east to west looking for an appropriate location. Now, we had an affinity for being in our own community, but the truth is that our decision to move to East Harlem was based on purely business reasons. We could afford to buy a large enough piece of real estate. We could afford to renovate it when banks would not lend us any money. This was 14 years ago, mind you. And I often equate technology to what I often define as the greatest obstacle to small businesses, and that is access to capital. Money, like technology, is controlled. And I think it's no mistake that our communities suffer from access to capital and access to technology and access. I'll give you one perfect example. We run a for-profit business. One of the things that happened to us in this transition from analog to digital is we started digitizing analog material. Because if you're fortunate to live long enough and not make too many enemies, your friends grow in the business with you. So as I'm talking to friends of mine who are running large divisions and networks, I'm asking them, what are you going to do with that big analog library that I see over your shoulder? So, oh, you know, Joe and Harry are going to digitize it. And you guys can't get on the air regularly. You're fighting to get on the air. You're never going to get that library digitized. Let me do it for you. So we started digitizing material, analog material, and creating digital files. At which point we realized the obvious that most of you know, and that is that an email is a great advancement over a letter, except for the fact that most people can't find an email that was sent to them 2 weeks ago. But that letter that you put in the family Bible 20 years ago is still there. You know exactly where it is. So there are asset management issues. So we realized that it wasn't enough to just create digital files. We needed to create digital asset management systems. So we suddenly became expert in this because we had to teach it to ourselves and learn it from those who knew. And those were really big players in the business. So we started, hence the company name Digital Laundry. My wife likes to say, dirty analog in, clean digital out. So we built a business around this and continue to do creative work. Here we are, a for-profit company, creating a profit. We can't get a fiber connection. Most of you know or should know, the digital backbone runs up 3rd Avenue. I'm 100 yards from that backbone and can't get to it. We have the highest speed connections that we can buy at a reasonable price, and we still run into bottlenecks moving data around. When you start talking about high definition television, let alone 4K, you start talking about moving large blocks of data. Even internally, within edit rooms, we're moving large blocks of data. So
We're coming, George. We're coming.
I am, and I can't wait. And I'm a customer,
Yeah.
ready to work, because my success depends on being able to deliver product to clients. If I can't upload a short or a television program to a distributor, I'm in big trouble. So oftentimes we end up relying on good old-fashioned SneakerNet or FedEx to get digital files from one place to another, because we're still bottlenecked with old technology, and we're taking advantage of most of the systems available to us. So I think that's a long way to get around to, I have been very fortunate, we have been very fortunate, but we run into historical problems that, you know, whether you're a for-profit or a not-for-profit, you're not immune to these problems. So we find a workaround, and we're involved in training people, and we've been involved in developing training programs to bring people into this business, because I know that were it not for me being given an opportunity, I wouldn't be here. So I make it my business to always create opportunities for other people, especially people who look like me, to get a foot in the door. Because I tell people, nobody was born a director or a cameraman. Somebody gave that young man or that young woman a chance to pick up a camera or to learn the software required to run one of these sophisticated edit systems. You learn them. Somebody's got to give you a chance. So if we don't create those opportunities, I don't know where they will be created. Because if I had a nickel for every meeting about diversity that I've attended, quite honestly, I wouldn't be sitting here. And my answer is, there's a very simple solution to solving diversity problems in large corporations. Hire people who look like the people you want to make decisions. When you do that, you will have no diversity issues.
Is that a drop the mic type thing, or? Thank you, George. I couldn't agree more with you on the diversity topic. It's awfully overdone at this point. I think we have to start thinking about it a little differently. As I had the good fortune of speaking at the United Nations, and we tried to reframe diversity from being a problem to being an opportunity. And it's really that simple. And you can have a company that's not diverse and make it for a while, but you can't make it for long. Diversity is always, because diversity is not defined by ethnicity or by, your gender. Diversity is really defined by your experience and your frame of reference and, sort of where you're coming from. So, a lot of people don't know I grew up surfing. I was a champion swimmer. And people go, oh, really? And I was a video game player and all this kind of stuff. So you don't know where people are coming from. And one of our good friends is a PhD, and she's blind. So when she talks about technology and other things, she's coming from that perspective. So that diversity helps when she's consulting with folks. So I couldn't agree with you more on that. I've got a couple more questions for all of them, meaning like they're all going to comment on a topic. But Anthony over here is going to walk around with a mic. If you have questions, you're going to say your name, affiliation if you want, and ask the question in the form of a question, and we'll do our best to answer that. So, and please, just acknowledge Anthony. He'll bring the mic around because we want to be able to hear you clearly. So we have a big interest, Silicon Harlem, and I think the majority of people in this room, if not all, have a big interest in expanding the Tech Hub, as I mentioned in my opening remarks. From your own experience and perspective, and we'll start with Kokai, how can we do this? I mean, we think it starts here, but what are some of the key things you think we ought to be thinking about or doing as a community to galvanize and really put our arms around this so that people aren't having a slow connection or a lot of times broadband gets throttled by the provider. So poor George might be right at that time when he needs to upload a major show, and that's when they're throttling down the broadband speed. So what are some of the things we need to do to ensure that our community is getting the best infrastructure and the best outcomes for the Tech Hub?
So I would say generally, at least from my perspective, at EDC, we're thinking about we're thinking about what's happening now with workplace in the city generally. So traditionally, the financial district was the hub of industry, and people would come in from the outer boroughs into those particular neighborhoods. But now we're transitioning away from that, where people can live, work, play in their same community. And so we're really thinking about how to encourage industry development in specific neighborhoods. So George, I think it's super exciting that you made, even if it was a business decision, the fact that you brought your business to Harlem is phenomenal for the neighborhood, for your business, win-win. And I think, if we can partner opportunities like that with training and the things that are already happening that Persepolis is already doing on the ground to equip individuals with hard tech skills and partner those skills with this burgeoning ecosystem that is developing here, I think we can surely achieve the goal of you know, of creating infrastructure here and creating a pipeline here that will further benefit development in the neighborhood.
You know, it's no accident why we are here at the Silverman School of Social Work. One of the things we were very adamant about at Silicon Harlem when we started was let's make sure the universities are a part of what we're doing. Not only because there's great talent at the universities, but because we can actually do work together, work on these issues together. So when you talk about ecosystem, and I'll say these in some closing remarks, but there's a real science to an ecosystem to create that sustainability. George, you want to make any comments about this?
I tend to think of this at two ways. One, around policy issues. You know, you guys know this in greater detail than I do, but providers make business decisions about how to deploy technology. And some of those decisions most of those decisions are based on pure economics of profitability. But many of them are also driven by policy initiatives, and that comes sometimes from political pressure that's brought to bear on providers to provide communities like ours with appropriate access and services. And then I think about the training component. We've been involved in training programs. I think it's important, as I said, to give people opportunities and train people, but the flip side, and I think the head side of that coin, is making sure that there are opportunities for those people once you train them. Nothing breaks my heart more than to train a young person with some specific skill sets only to watch them run into a brick wall of employment. I'm lucky to have many friends and associates in the business, so oftentimes I'm literally picking up the phone going, hello, I've got this young person who's really on the ball, knows how to show up, knows how to do their work, is trained. I think they'd be a good fit for your organization. And I can get that person in the door. But it's anecdotal at best. It's one-off. I don't have a place to send a dozen network-level system administrators to if I train them. I don't have a place to put those people. I don't. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's a complex problem, and we try to pick away at it from different sides.
So, what's interesting about what you're saying is, if you look through any job board, it's like a ton of jobs for system administrators or cybersecurity or data scientists. Ton of jobs. We got more jobs than people qualified for. You know, that's a skills gap. This is where, you know, Perscola's trying to fill that gap. We're trying to fill that gap. And it's just, again, access and exposure. I notice in the room that we have a summer academy every year, and it's always great to see those who come through our academy as high school kids or early college to come back and say hi. And somebody in this room knows who I'm talking about, I think. And we have, is that you, Ashley? Who's sitting next to you? This is my friend. Okay. Well, Ashley came through to us through the Microsoft, what's it called, Ashley? Yes. And I met her. They asked me to come down and speak to her cohort. We became friends, and she ended up working at Silicon Harlem. I learned more from her on some of the challenges that happen in Harlem than almost anybody. She grew up right here, smack dab in the middle of Harlem, and just very insightful on some of the things that have shaped a little bit of our mission in and of itself. So happy to see you back in the house, Ashley. Continue, Teresa.
Thank you. Yeah, the one thing I would add is for these tech hubs to be truly beneficial for the East Harlem community, I think a really important kind of mentality that we have to make sure is kind kind of ingrained in all of us is the belief that community members need to be involved in the process of deciding how those tech resources, how the technology is going to be used. And I think that I think very often very well-meaning folks in developers or other folks, might come into a community and not truly then respond to the needs of that community. And so creating meaningful processes by which the community can really think through, how is this technology going to be used by us, in what way, how do we make sure that it's being implemented in a way that really responds to our current needs, and doing that in partnership with other folks who have some of the skills that are potentially not there in the community or need to be taught and fostered.
Very good. Damon, you want to add something?
Very quickly. So, for me, I believe the success, or one of the layers of success, would be one, how you define success, but also how when you finally arrive to success, how do you communicate that to the community? Because there's a such thing as a SMO, a social media optimization officer. So for millennials, that could be something that they would love to do, but they can't see the connection. So if you start to get businesses to come into a community, and you can, number one, hopefully aim towards a systems change where the hiring practices and tools that they use that are cutting off great talent at the knees, you can say, hey, we have talent in this community for you, which is why we're glad you're here, but also make that connection for them to say, hey, listen, this Silicon Harlem is not just about what you think it is. That intense need that you have to be on social media, that could be transformed into a job with this company that is now here inside of our community. So I think it's about how you spell success when you achieve it, and how you communicate that to the community so that they can understand how to properly leverage this system and how to benefit from it.
Great insight. Again, we're taking questions if you have. We have one over there. While you're walking over there, Anthony, I got to tell one more quick little story about one of the kids that came out of our academy. It was our very first cohort, actually. And during the camp, she told me she wasn't really into tech and innovation or any of that kind of stuff. But I knew she was very smart. She came from a single-family home and all that kind of good stuff. Nobody actually really had much of a college background. And but as we went through the summer, she got more and more into it, and I was just so happy to see that sort of blossom. She was a very talented person anyway. And so when she went into she was a junior when we caught her. She went into her senior year, and that summer between her junior and senior year, she got a job, an internship with About.com. And it furthered her interest in technology. She was working around all the software developers, et cetera. Goes into her senior year, she gets accepted with a full ride scholarship to Smith College, and calls or emails us. She stays in touch, which is, not all kids do that, but she stayed in touch. Said, I've decided to major in computer science and engineering. And I was blown away. I was like, wow, first of all, I wish I would have done that. And second of all, here's this young lady, uptown girl who's getting ready to write her own ticket. She's now at college. She's in her sophomore year, going to be a junior. And she wrote us about 2 or 3 weeks ago and said, I really found my passion in technology, and she's, I guess, to some degree, gave us some credit for that. And we were very humbled by it. She's like, if it wasn't for you guys, probably wouldn't have been into this. And oh, by the way, I have a new internship. And the letter went on to say, I've got an internship at NASA in California. She's our own little hidden figure. So one of these days, thank you, Dallas Bell. One of these days we'll have her in front of everybody, but she's a real success story, as you talk about, Damien, in our definition. So we have a question over here.
Yeah, I just Jerry Paller with RXI Digital, and I have the pleasure of working with Clayton and Bruce on several projects. But my question really comes down to the nuts and bolts of how do you build the infrastructure. If you're going to be wireless, you have to put the antennas and the receivers somewhere. On buildings, there are line of sight issues. There are pigeons flying in the way of the signal issues. What thinking is there? Can you use government buildings, either federal, state, or local government buildings, as antenna points, and still allow people to use those antennas in a commercial venture?
Sounds like you asked the question and answered it. But we'll let somebody else chime in if you want. If anyone on the panel wants to chime in, if not, you know, it's okay. Jerry knows this stuff very well, so
I'll chime in,
teasing.
but I want to first preface by saying that I'm probably the least qualified in my organization, but just to say that that is something that we do. That's part of our work, is to really think through what is the design look like. So we have to do site assessments. We have a partner, which is Sky Packets, who's in the room right there, Steve, who's been helping us to make sure that these designs are workable and feasible for each community, because as Human mentioned, we're working in actually 6 different communities, all with different, rooftop access and all sorts of, as you know, all sorts of different challenges to that. So, it's a very intensive process that we're going through to make sure that we are creating networks that function for the community. We can probably, Human, who's here, and Steve, who's behind you, can give you more specifics on how we do that, but that's an important point.
I'll just chime in very quickly and say, and Jerry, you know a lot about this, but what I am finding is that it's going to take a large consortium to make this work. Because what you're talking about isn't just about East Harlem, it's everywhere in the country. So infrastructure is so tremendous, but has been controlled by just a small group of people. A small group of companies have controlled most of our infrastructure. So cities are now starting to go, should I keep that going or should I do something else? So you look at a city like Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they went all the way over and said, we're going to become our own ISP. What that meant was they have already owned buildings. They have great schools that they can use. They have great facilities that they can already use to do their transmission, whether it's wireless or wired. So you have to have a public, private, and community connection to really make, in my opinion, the most affordable, but yet next generation network. Silicon Harlem's vision is to have 10 times the speed and 1/10 of the cost, literally, because we don't have that legacy network that a lot of these incumbents have that they have to maintain. They make a lot of money on that, so to disrupt themselves doesn't make sense. We don't have that. We can start with the fresh new technology, but we can't do it without the city. The city has to say, yes, you can go on that NYCHA building, or yes, you can go on that school, or yes, you can get on that light pole. So it's an inclusive strategy that really has to make it work, and that's for every city. We're winding down in time, so you better ask some good questions, including Mr. Dallas Lee Bell. Do you have a question? I have that effect on people.
That's what happens when you skip lunch. Clayton Banks, my 2-part question. In terms of academic partners, where are we in the middle of April with the New York City Tech Pipeline and City University, and what's the conversation happening as Cornell Tech rises at this hour on Roosevelt Island?
So the first part of your question, as you know, we have been working very closely with CCNY particularly in instantiating curriculum for their continuing ed program. So one of the things we're finding is that there's a lot of adults, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, that need to be retrained or get new skills. It's not just our high school kids, it's adults. Some of them perhaps never even finished college. So we decided to work with the universities in their continuing ed departments to put programs in where someone can learn HTML5 or someone can learn CSS3 or the full stack, if you will. Database development. We just did a deal with York College in Queens where we are now, he's my favorite guy, isn't he? So, and he's CUNY all the way, no doubt. So York College, in their case, we actually have a full semester running on campus through their continuing ed program where we are teaching them all the full stack and all that kind of stuff, but we're also training them to be Java certified through Oracle. So in May, they will all be taking the test. We got 20 kids in this thing. And we know that will funnel them right into a great job. So not only do they learn how to do the development side, they're learning how to do the back end and the database side. And ultimately, we're trying to spread that in every CUNY and SUNY that we possibly can. We have some opportunities with MEOC even, or MEOC, I should say. And we have some representation here from there as well, but we're putting in programs all over the city. We also have our program running in Transit Tech in Brooklyn, which is a high school, where we're teaching young people how to create startups and how to really embrace technology as a way to solve problems in their areas or just think through innovation. So we have a great curriculum running there. So when people ask us, you know, how do you guys make money? Well, luckily, we've been pretty good at that, and the Department of Education of New York City retains us to do this type of work throughout the city. We have another question. We have one here, and then we got Oz back there.
How you guys doing? My name is Toby Abengude. I'm with the New York City Tech Talent Pipeline over at SBS. So
there's the answer.
This work, my day-to-day, I think about these things all the time. I actually wanted to ask can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
I actually wanted to ask a provocative question, and it's not reflective of my views at all because I wouldn't be able to show up to work if it was, but what would be your response to people who say you can't address the tech talent issue as it relates to underserved communities like East Harlem without addressing the sort of cultural barriers that prevent these communities from actually connecting to jobs, period? I know the gentleman back there, he talked about infrastructure and how, you know, a lot of these different city assets are actually underutilized in general. And I know EDC is actually doing work to sort of repurpose a lot of these assets for different industries. So, but that's infrastructure, that's physical property. You know, what would you say to a person that's saying, hey, you guys are actually putting the cart before the horse, trying to sort of build these pipelines into these communities when, you know, it's one thing to get a kid into a boot camp at General Assembly or Full Stack or New York Code and Design Academy, but this is the same kid who doesn't have a Metro card, so he can't go to the interviews for whatever startup he's into, and or, you know, whereas these intensive boot camps that will prepare students for a job working as a web developer are 9 to 5 and really more because they want you to have extra coding projects. What about that young mother that has to work, you know, part-time to support a family? But we say.
No, I got you, brother. I do.
You got me?
I got
All right,
you.
cool.
I got you.
Stop.
So I'm gonna let Bruce make a couple quick comments to you, who's sitting right in front of you. So Bruce, if you could sort of make a quick comment about it. We're gonna come to the panel. Holland, if you wanna say anything. Anyone who wants to comment on this, but I think it's not only provocative, but a good question. So we'll give Bruce the mic, Anthony.
So that was just a hypothetical? Well, I mean, one of the things that Tech Talent Pipeline has had to address was this idea that as you're pushing the Flatiron schools and the General Assemblies, you don't get enough students in from what they say are their target communities because of the cost. So that's why you have to have these programs like Per Scholes for the things we're doing in the community with the MEOC or with the York College that is really focused on how you can support these young people. And similarly, you can't just support them to do the coding, you also have to provide all the wraparound social services, which I know is also a hallmark of the Per Scholes model. But basically, that's like, that's one of those false negatives that people will throw out. When, you know, and you can have that viewpoint when you're sitting on the other side of this, where it's very easy for you to tie into technology or tie into capital or go to a General Assembly.
Anyone else want to comment?
Yeah, I love that question because I've dealt with that
Okay.
for a number of years. So just coming from an employer standpoint and dealing with conscious and unconscious biases when it comes to underserved community residents. You know, I've had a number of conversations. Some of them got very interesting. To the point where I could share this, you know, I won't share the company, but I was asked, what's the value proposition of hiring people of color? I'm not going to tell you what I said, but, you know, so when I was approached with that, you know, the first thing I decided to do was say, listen, what you have to do is understand, first of all, there's a projected million jobs that will be vacant inside of IT by the year 2020. And employers are saying, I want diverse talent, I want to be inclusive, and I want to do all these things, but I don't know where to find them. That means you're not looking. That's all it means. You know, I started a national conversation series because of that conversation that I mentioned to you and the questions that you're asking. It's called Diverse by Design. And what I was getting tired of was that we know the grim stats around diversity and inclusion. We know all the barriers attached to underserved communities. But we also know how companies that are diverse overperform. We know that, you know, men and women, people of color and women inside of IT are some of the least represented inside of IT. We already know that. So I didn't start this national conversation with C-suite executives just to talk about those stats. We're talking about, you need diverse talent. Here are the best practices. Let's go into action together. And the way that you get past all those barriers that employers would put in front of you or any other organization is by simply taking action, looking and targeting diverse talent and moving into that direction. One company that does this phenomenally, and I know the CIO from Procter & Gamble, they actually look for people of color from underserved communities. They go after them once they submit their application, and if they don't make it, they go after them again and say, let's train you, and we're gonna hire you in Procter & Gamble. That's the kind of innovation that's needed if you're really going to have diversity and inclusion inside of your companies. And that's the bold steps that need to be taken in order to make it work.
Wow. Per Scotus. Jeez. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time here. I'll take one more question from the audience, maybe two. We got to do Oz.
Hey, Clayton.
Make it a question, Mr. Sultan.
Well, I do. But it's also a comment. So you know, I teach at CUNY Baruch, and I work with West Point. We just actually inked a partnership between NYIT and West Point today. So what I'd be interested in is talking to a couple of you guys and figuring out. Here's the first thing we're doing. We're going to be bringing education to the hub. And the first thing, and if you're not familiar with the hub is the CUNY iHub, which is located on 125th Street next to the Apollo. The top tier challenge we have is how you get folks interested in exactly what you're talking about, you know, get them retrained. We're focusing on 1 year. Okay, so how do we get juniors, seniors, college age kids, put them in a 1 year cybersecurity or digital counterterrorism program? Because you're talking about a couple million jobs. We have 40,000 jobs unfilled in the military right now. We've got about 2 million jobs unfilled in the private sector, just in cybersecurity and counterterrorism, okay? So that's things we could start tapping into. But I think we have to look at the flip side and where some of these other questions have come from, at the opposite end of the spectrum. How do we get young kids interested in figuring out, because this is a tough path. I mean, even if you talk to Silicon Valley families now, it's like, where are you sending your kids? Are you getting them into the right, you know, tutor for second grade, that sort of thing. But what should we be doing when we're talking to kids who are like between 2 and 7 in terms of how do you get them engaged? Because we're figuring out this top tier stuff and it's going to trickle down. And it will, as Clayton is what you're talking to, it's going to trickle up to the 50s, right? Get people in the 20s and the 30s, 40s, and 50s. But how do you hit them young?
Okay. Damien, I think you probably have to start that one out.
Sure. So we deal with individuals from 18 to 55, but we often have ventured down to figure out how do we catch individuals earlier on, because that's how you could really start to set that pathway into technology. And one of the things that we found, that we were dealing with a high school, and we still are, because we're trying to figure out what's that on-ramping mechanism that we can use in order to set the tone for young children inside of IT. And the most simplest answer is to make sure that this is introduced in our school systems as early as possible as a realistic track for them to take on. It's the only way that we'll be able to make them familiar with it and get them interested inside of IT, but it has to be a really robust explanation and it's sort of like a campaign wrapped around these careers inside of IT in order to get them early enough. And that's one of the major findings that we found in this on-ramping partnership that we've had with a couple of high schools. It's just introducing it to them early and explaining it in a way that excites them, and hopefully they will move down that track.
So we got one last question. I think it's Alfredo back there. So I think we're going to let him ask this last question. I'm going to make just a quick closing remark, and then we're going to go eat the rest of those vegetables. Okay?
Yes, but my name is Alfredo. I live here in Harlem. I grew up in Hell's Kitchen, product of public education, and I made it through the EOP program at the State University. I was able to escalate, get my degree, get master's degree. I was able to go to corporate America for about 7 years. I couldn't climb the ladder, so I worked, and it looks like a Latino had to do 3 times more back then than the average, regular worker to move ahead. Then I transitioned to academia. I worked for about 7 years as a dean of enrollment at Naya College. I saw policy, develop in the college as we grew. Then I transitioned out of that into teaching for about 10 years also. Now I'm doing my own business and other things. But what I noticed with this thing with diversity is that the institutions that I worked for and the State University where I went to, and I'm trying to get through a PhD right now in philosophy, is that diversity institutions are placed in these places to protect against lawsuits. So what I've seen with diversity is not so that you could be diverse and get people from other cultures. It's really to protect the institution from being sued. I experienced this as an administrator in a college. I experienced it as a PhD student in a college. And I wonder if in corporate America I was too young to notice it. But that's my question. Are these diversity levers put in place to really be diverse, or just to protect against lawsuits and this diversity political correctness that we are experiencing now?
Where's HR?
So,
We'll let Damien and George, you say a few words
I'm
about
sorry.
this as well.
Well, I can just share with you from my own experience working in Fortune 500 companies that I have experienced two strands of diversity efforts. One is the one that you've described, where corporations are obviously fearful of lawsuits for bad behavior on the part of their officers, for which they should be concerned. And I've also experienced very enlightened corporate leadership that understands that if you want to innovate, you have to put people with different points of view to work on a problem. And that by definition means diversity. They find profitability in diversity. If you have a problem, the simple experiment is, if you have a problem that needs to be solved, do you hand it to 6 people who all look alike and went to the same school and grew up in the same neighborhoods and speak the same language? Or do you give it to 6 people who come to that problem from different points of view? You speak Spanish like I grew up, Spanish was my first language, and I know, being multilingual, when you speak different languages, you approach problem solving differently because you look at the world differently. It gives you an advantage. I think that, my experience growing up in Harlem gave me a great advantage moving through my career, especially once I started traveling outside of the United States, where people, when I was a kid, people used to make fun of me for rolling my R's because I spoke Spanish first. And when I left the United States and started traveling the world, I realized that people with an accent were respected because it was understood they were an educated person who spoke more than one language. So I've experienced both. Corporations that fear retaliation for their bad acts, and I've also seen enlightened leaders who understand that if you want an advantage in innovation, you must have diverse problem solvers working within your company. And they encourage and they promote and they want different kinds of people solving problems. That's how they come up with new discoveries.
Yeah, really quickly, and I got a solution for that too. Yes, corporations, there are a lot of corporations that do this diversity and inclusion, or they take that on as window dressing. And in the conversations that I've had with many corporate organizations, I told them this is window dressing. And you know what? I had an aha moment in one of my conversations with Barclays because I kept running into that wall. This is all window dressing. You just needed to make it look good, and you're not really committed to diversity and inclusion. But I started looking at it as an opportunity, because we can have conversations around diversity and inclusion forever and have different views and different ways on how to attack it. The only way to prove it is to do it. So with Barclays, I was talking to the CIO of Barclays at the time, Joe Squeary, and we were going around in circles. And I said, you know what, Joe, listen, let's stop going over the stats. Let me give you 5 people from Priscolis, and let's see if it works. What happened was, after he saw the business value that they added, these were individuals that did not have 4-year degrees, were passionate, ambitious, and we trained them thoroughly. We made sure that they understood that once you go into the workplace that you represent Priscolis, and we're going to give you all the help that you need to be successful. We're counting on you to be successful. We believe in you enough to be able to do that. Once we gave them 5 interns, they then, I was able to get them to take their, what they were calling an apprenticeship program in the UK. Never came on stateside. They brought it to the US for the first time, and they took 15 of our students, and all of them are employed at Barclays now. So when you run into companies that are doing this for window dressing or for whatever they do, and they may not want philanthropy, and that's fine. We're all about creating opportunities for people inside of underserved communities. So let's work together. Try this talent out, and I'll show you what diversity could do better than I could tell you what diversity could do.
Well, there you go. So I'm going to pivot from the diversity conversation. I know that's one of our favorite topics, but I'm going to go back to tech. We're very excited about what's happening here. We think this could be just one of the greatest tech hubs. I've been writing something called "Why Should Downtown Have All the Fun?" We should have the fun up here. So let me thoroughly thank perhaps the greatest panel you've ever seen tonight. That is Kokai, George, Teresa, and Damien. Big hand for them, man. They got some serious insight. I want to thank the Silberman School of Social Work for hosting us. A great facility, wouldn't you say? And, listen, everyone in this room, I was teasing a little bit about diversity, but when we talk about diversity, we got to stop talking amongst ourselves. You got to take it to where it's a real issue, as Damien has done. We talked with Intel about that. We wrote Jesse Jackson's talking points on tech a couple years ago. He went to Intel, got them to devote $300 million to diversity initiatives. This ain't about us just sitting up here and commiserating and figuring it out and talking to each other. Got to get outside these walls. So that's why my lane is tech. Even though I'm a very good diversity advocate and all that, a practitioner, I'm much more focused on the infrastructure and the things that are going to increase diversity through real success. If there's one thing a capitalist country like the United States loves, is someone who knows how to make money. So we have to continue to build that muscle amongst our kids so that diversity is no longer an issue. It's no longer a talking point. It's more just a natural thing. And we're seeing that happen with young folks anyway. They're growing up in a much more diverse environment, much more access. So I just want to say thank you guys all for coming out. This is the start. You are part of the very first, let's say, beginning of building this wonderful tech hub. I have to acknowledge New America and the EDC for this great vision of building a resilient network in East Harlem. There's only 6 communities in all of New York that are getting this. Only 6 communities in the New York City footprint are getting this, and East Harlem is one of them. We are desperately looking for those businesses that will be a part of this network. So if you know of any, or if you're a business owner, see that man right there, Anthony. He will make that happen for you. With that, I will say thank you. Enjoy the rest of the networking. Good night.